And then you've kind of got what's historically called the top agent in the market. And they're the ones that are doing, the lion's share of the business. They've got 10 or 20 people working for them. And they're great agents too, but at the same time, you're not always working with them. You're working with the people on their team and their, the way they have it set up. And we found no difference in terms of working with that 2 to 5% or the top agent, as long as everyone's motivated to do a great job.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside. Woo! Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Jay Klaus, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. A Berg's Eye View himself, Erik Berg.
Wait, that's not me.
That's not you.
What's going on?
Today, we are doing our second ever VC mashup episode, where I will be accompanied on the interview with Erik Berg. Erik Berg is an investment analyst at Rev1 Ventures, a startup studio here in Columbus, Ohio. He writes a blog called A Berg's Eye View. I really appreciate his viewpoint on venture capital in the Midwest. He worked his way into getting a job in VC over the last couple of years here, and we thought it'd be fun to bring him on as my co-host in this interview today. So, Erik, you're going to take a back seat.
I am, but the nice thing is I'm going to be a fly on the wall because I'm going to get to listen to this interview and pull out some of the questions that Erik asks and learn from them. I mean, I think back to the Ross Baird VC mashup, and I still use a lot of those questions in our ongoing interviews.
Yeah, sometimes it's good to get some fresh blood in here to give us a different take on how they evaluate conversations with founders and how they direct conversations with the founders.
Before we bring on Erik, Jay, I think we should introduce the company that you and Erik are going to be talking with today. Who is that?
Erik and I are going to be speaking with Ben Mizes, the co-founder and CEO of Clever Real Estate. Clever Real Estate is a nationwide referral service that helps you sell your home and save on commission. Clever's network of partner agents includes over 1,000 top local agents who provide Clever home sellers and buyers with full service to list and market their home and help with all of the paperwork and negotiations to get you through to closing, but at a fraction of the usual cost. Clever was founded in 2017. They're based in St. Louis, Missouri, and have raised $1.5 million in funding at this point from Cultivation Capital in their Spirit of St. Louis fund. So that's who we'll be speaking to today. But before we talk to Ben, let's meet Erik Berg from Rev1 Ventures.
Erik, welcome to the show. Welcome to taking over. You're taking over my seat, man.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
In our intro here, I mentioned that you had worked your way into a role in VC, and I name-dropped your blog, A Berg's Eye View. Can you give us a little bit of an intro to the man, Erik Berg?
Yeah, pretty new here in Columbus. Moved out. I went out to school out in Virginia. Was living in DC, working at a private equity firm called the Carlyle Group. My background is in finance, but during college, I had internships at both a medical device startup as well as their VC firm backers. And so over the course of those 2 summers, really fell in love with venture capital, the startup space. And so knew that long term, that's where I wanted to be. Took a job at a private equity firm to kind of get that experience and resume boost. And then really was very intentional about trying to get into venture capital wherever that took me. And it took me to Columbus, Ohio, where I went for the first time for my interview. I'd never been to Ohio before. And so I joined Rev1 Ventures, which is a pretty unique firm in the landscape of VC. We call ourselves an investment startup studio, which means that not only do we invest capital, but we also provide strategic services to help startups grow. Kind of the platform model where it can include hiring, connecting them with service providers, and we also have people on staff that serve as strategic advisors with all of our businesses. And so I work on the investment team where I'm an analyst. And so my role is very heavy on the investment side. I participate in due diligence, portfolio management for our existing portfolio, lead generation and pipeline management looking for new deals. So really excited to be here and thanks for having me on.
How many deals are you looking at in like a given week?
in a given week, so it's interesting. The way our model works is we have kind of this big front end deal flow. So one of my colleagues, their whole job is just to take first calls and first meetings with startups. And so we look at about 1,000 deals in a year, and that's very heavy on them. And then I'll get pulled into a few calls a month, more kind of area expertise focused. So I will get pulled into things, but that's not my primary role. The way it kind of works is we have our whole platform. You can actually start working with it before we've invested. So a lot of our deal flow is sort of validated through our platform, having my colleagues work with startups. And then by the time we see a deal, we've sometimes already had a relationship with that startup for, months or potentially 1 or 2 years.
And so when you're working on these deals, you're doing research and you're modeling, or how much are you just like interviewing the founder? What's your role breakdown to?
It's kind of all of the above. We do a lot of, we'll have meetings with founders where we just kind of try to get some face time and get to know them. We'll look at their pitches. And then as part, when we're doing deals, a lot of my role is around putting together our due diligence memos, which kind of encapsulate all the various due diligence we've conducted and put it in a format where my boss and our investment committee and even the state, if we're getting any state funds on this deal, can all kind of review the deal through that document. So kind of a long-winded answer, but
yeah, thorough though.
Yeah.
I think that
Thanks.
You are bringing so much insight to the podcast, and I'm really excited to step away and come back and listen to the podcast and the interview. So I'm going to sign off here, and you guys are going to head into the interview, and can't wait to see you on the other side.
But before we get into that interview, if you guys have thoughts on this episode, please tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm as we go through. We'd love to hear your thoughts here as Erik with a K and I talk to Ben Mizes, the founder of Clever Real Estate. And now for some validation.
Jay, what's better than coffee in the morning?
Is there anything better than coffee in the morning?
I don't know. I just got a new notification that I got a rating and review on Upside, and that feels a little bit better than coffee in the morning to me. That picked me right on up.
I could take some dopamine in the morning.
Ooh, dopamine. Is that what you get when... Wait, is that a drug or is that...
I believe it's a human chemical process.
All right. So human chemical processes in the morning. I got a notification this morning that said, hey, Jay and Erik have a way of revitalizing the classic startup interview style and making the content fresh and fun to listen to. Look, Jay, in an ocean of startup podcasts, Upside is in a league of its own, and I would highly recommend you give it a listen. That's from Pilotion.
I think, if I'm looking at the same review, that it's probably Pilot Ian and not Pelotion.
I think it's Pelotion. He's a Greek god.
Ah, that is intense. It does sound like a very powerful review, which I appreciate and has a lot of weight to it. One that I would attribute to a Greek god.
Yeah, I think it feels good in the morning to wake up to a new review. And I think more people should review our podcast. What do you think?
I agree. If you guys want a chance to have your review read on air, please go on iTunes and leave us a review for the podcast, and we just may read it here in the morning.
5 stars, Greek god, Pelotion. Let's do it.
Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Here on Upside, we like to start with a background on the founder. So can you tell us about the history of Ben?
So I got my start in tech. I think it was my sophomore year of college. I was at Indiana University. I'd watched all my friends get internships at the big 4 accounting firms, investment banks, and it really didn't interest me. So I actually went on Reddit and I made a post on our startup saying, I want to work at a startup. I will literally do anything as long as I can intern here and learn. An awesome guy by the name of Kevin Davis at the time was the founder of Geekatoo. He told me to do a call. It went pretty well. He said, if you can start tomorrow, you've got the job. So I got started doing business development. I was selling deals to big companies like first ever one I talked to was Nest, Curves Gym, Schlaglock, Yale, selling our network of 7,000 on-demand tech support agents. And we were a service that could do door-to-door tech support anywhere you needed it. And then from there, I really caught the bug. I ended up starting a first mobile app that paid users for every text they sent and received. We raised about $300,000 for that, grew to about 50,000 active users, and we're never quite able to get it over the hump. I ended up taking a job at a different real estate startup after college. I learned a ton at that time. They made me learn real estate investing to help sell their platform. And that's when I really fell in love with real estate and actually built my own portfolio. I bought my first 4-family residence, moved in. So I was living in one, renting out the others. And then over the next year with a partner who's our CSO, actually built up a portfolio of 22 apartments. And then the job I was working, the company folded, fired everyone. I was suddenly, sitting at my apartment. I was living for free because I was living off the rent for the tenants and kind of didn't want to go back, didn't want to do my own thing, and got the idea for Clever. Here we are about a little over a year and a half later. We've grown from a small startup in my apartment to a team of 20 here, looking to grow as fast as we can.
Wow, that was a fantastic rocket ship through all of that. Want to back up and touch on a couple of those things.
Sure.
You posted in a subreddit that you wanted to work at a startup, and someone said, if you start tomorrow, you have the job.
Yeah, I kind of thought it would be kind of a summer internship thing. And he was like, I think it was in the winter. And he said, I can't wait till the summer. I need help now. Can you start tomorrow? And it kind of hit me at that time. I was in entrepreneurship classes. It wasn't too difficult. And it sounded like a great idea. I said yes and just jumped on in. Didn't really know what I was getting in for, but knew it would be a lot of fun.
And that was in business development?
Yeah, with a company called Geekatoo.
That's wild.
So were you guys based in the same area, or were you working remotely at first?
So I was in Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, and he was in San Francisco. So it was a completely remote arrangement.
How did you go about learning business development? Because for most people, the first time they do that, it can be kind of a scary, daunting thing to just be essentially cold calling a lot of the time.
I was really fortunate. We had one other team member who came on right about the same time as me, and she had a ton more experience, had a great background in cold email. She had a way bigger network than I did. So I got to kind of learn both from her, and then we got to learn together the best way to do it. So it was awesome having someone to kind of bounce ideas off of, building an email list, chatting about the best way to do copy. And then once you'd cold email your way to a meeting, I had no idea what I was doing or even how to get someone to agree to use our service. So then we'd bring in the founder and CEO, Kevin would help us, her and I would kind of run game film of what we did badly, what we did well on the calls. It was just an awesome environment to really learn. And by the end of it, I felt great, approaching a big company, figuring out what questions to ask to learn their needs, and then position us as the service that could solve their problems.
So where did the idea of this text messaging app that you came up with next, where did that come from? That seems not totally related.
So this one's a pretty funny story. At that time, I was in a fraternity, and a lot of my friends knew me as, the guy who was doing startups. I built a business kind of on the side. I would buy old textbooks and laptops with a friend and flip them on eBay and sometimes fix them. So we did about 100K in 3 or 4 months in sales. So I was kind of known as the business guy in the house. So one of my friends was pretty drunk at a party. He just missed class, and he said, Ben, I really hate waking up. I wish someone could pay me to wake up. And I was, a little drunk myself, and I thought, that's a good idea. What if someone could pay you to wake up? And then I woke up the next morning and started thinking, like, how is this possible? And I thought, well, what if instead of an alarm, I woke up with a video ad waking me up? And that's where we got the idea, and that's where I first learned about ad tech. And if the CPM on Android for a video ad is anywhere from $1 to $4, you'd have to hear 4,000 times to wake up to make even $4. So that was not going to be feasible, but that's where I got the idea. What is the thing that we do enough that we could share the ad revenue with the users and they'd make real money and it wouldn't take 4,000 days for them to get a payout? And that's where we arrived at texting.
So you did that, and that was also in college.
That was the end of college, and then about 6 months after.
Okay. And then you started getting interested in real estate. So talk to me about your first entry into real estate.
I was at a different real estate startup. I honestly had no interest in real estate. I was just looking for startups in San Francisco and a little bit in St. Louis, where I was from, and just happened to find this company that had raised a round, and they were in real estate, and thought, I've always kind of been interested in this, but mostly was just interested in working for a startup. And they had kind of a residential model that wasn't going that well. So they put me really by the end on growing their platform for investors to buy and sell single family homes. And they told me, to do this, you have to learn about real estate investing. And that's where things really took off. I caught the bug. And by the time I was running the numbers and then looking on Zillow in St. Louis, it hit me that this is something I could do. And after listening to all these podcasts, I realized, I can do startups and I can invest in real estate. And real estate's going to let me be financially free and retire. This is like I know what I put in and I get out. And that lets me, go big and gamble on startups where 90% fail. And if I'm in the 90%, it's kind of like, well, I still got this real estate and I can then go try again.
So that company, I'm guessing, is Golden Key, the startup you're working at. Tell me about your first real estate investment that you mentioned that you bought a home yourself. When was that in relation to working at Golden Key?
I think it was maybe 3 or 4 months after that. And it was right when they told me to really focus aggressively on the platform we were building for investors to buy and sell. And it didn't take me long to kind of learn about this concept called house hacking, where you buy a 4-family property or a duplex and you live in one and rent out the others. And if you find the right one in St. Louis, in our market, it's pretty cash flow friendly. You could actually have tenants pay for your mortgage and all of your expenses and live for free. So I knew an area I wanted to live in St. Louis. It's called Tower Grove. It's kind of up and coming, where a lot of my friends lived. And I was really fortunate. I found an awesome building. At the time, I didn't really know how good of a deal I got, but it made sense on paper. And one of the things about being an entrepreneur, I'm always kind of willing to jump in. So I took the plunge and went under contract. I think I get closed on the building, about 4 or 5 months after working there.
Is this still a thing? Like, can I go and do this? Or is this an opportunity that gets taken out of the market by people like you doing it?
So this is most definitely still a thing, depending on where you are. In Ohio, I'm 99% positive it is a thing you can do. So the biggest thing people don't get, and it makes them feel like they can't do it, is that it seems expensive to buy a building for $220,000. But there's something called an FHA loan where you can buy a property for just 3.5% down. So I only paid $8,000 to buy this $220,000 building, and I negotiated a $5,000 check back from the seller to pay for all the repairs. So I was in it, less than 2 months' salary that I just saved up, and then from there I never put in another dime.
I always hear on the house hacking front that people go for like a duplex. I haven't heard the 4-family home. What, to me, that makes more sense to do the 4-family home because you're getting more income renting out 3 units. Why do you think I've heard duplexes more than 4-family homes? Is it just supply?
I think it comes down to a lot of people are afraid of being a landlord. I know I was one of the people who was afraid of being a landlord. And if you tell someone, instead of buying a duplex, let's get 3 times the number of tenants on your first go. And it is definitely more work, but at the same time, the numbers on 4 families are above and beyond better than duplexes. You can not have to pay anything. I think a lot of people are happy just saving on their rent and living mostly for free. But I really wanted, I can live in this house forever for free. So I was willing to kind of take on managing more tenants to make it happen.
Was entrepreneurship in your family for you to be on Reddit/r/startups, and to get into startups in college? What expanded your worldview to see that entrepreneurship was an option for you?
Yeah, it's definitely in my family. My grandpa, he used to own a couple drugstores in St. Louis City, and he actually ended up a long, long time ago getting shot at his drugstore, and he recovered, but he became kind of too afraid to do the retail thing. So that prompted him to actually start a pharmacy, and he was doing a lot of compounding and making effervescents. And then my dad was a flavor chemist, kind of got fed up with it, and then took over the family business, and he grew it like crazy, got into generic compounding and just growing this business to a huge level. And I guess seeing that as a kid, my dad was running his company. I just always kind of assumed, this is a thing that I'm just going to do. I'm just going to grow up and run a company. So it was cool having that belief of like, yeah, of course I'll run a company. That's what, I've seen it done. Why would I not be able to do this thing? And that definitely helps a lot, having that kind of, I can do it mindset put on you from the time you're 4.
Talk to me through the first several months, even up through the first year of being a landlord. What did you experience? What was something that you didn't expect? Sounds like you're glad that you did it, and I would love for you to make that accessible to me as somebody who is one of those people that thinks, I don't want to be a landlord. I
think the biggest thing about being a landlord is it's really about being proactive, and there's many, many different kinds of landlords. Like the property I bought was in a good area. When I moved in, my tenants were a nurse, a student, and a lawyer. So really great tenants. When we moved in, I said, hey, we're going to move to an online rent platform that'll do this automatically so I don't have to knock on your door. If you have any issues, text me, I'll take care of it. And it was more of a friendly experience. There weren't too many issues. Things would go wrong. They would text me. We'd work it out together. It felt like a very friendly experience, and it was awesome. I didn't feel pressured about it. It was just like people I was working with to provide a great home. But as we've expanded, I've become really interested in buying from, quote unquote slumlords where we're buying buildings we need to renovate, we need to improve them, and we've hired a manager to actually take care of the properties. And if I had bought a building like that where you come in, sometimes there's drug use in the building, evictions, there's not paying of rent. Being that kind of landlord is very different when you have to come in and say, we play it by the book, by the rules, by the law here. If you haven't paid in the first 3 days, I'm posting a notice. 10 days after that, I'm going to file. If you want to do that kind of tenant, it can be difficult. Or another building we've bought and moved in, it's the same one where we're actively managing now. It's a couple of consultants, some students, and it's the same kind of, friendly atmosphere where being a landlord isn't hard. It's more just doing your best to provide a great house, and actually worrying about the payment isn't an issue.
Is marketing to get tenants difficult?
I think pricing your units and figuring out your comps is difficult. Once you get a feel for, that kitchens and bathrooms really sell units, and most people want to move, or we are kind of in the summer and the spring, then you can get a feel for it. Putting your property on Zillow, Trulia, and all the big sites will mostly take care of itself. But if you don't price your unit correctly, it will sit vacant. And if you buy a building thinking you can raise the rents and it turns out you can't, a lot of it is figuring out, if you kick someone out because you think you can get rents $50 higher, and then you have to spend $1,000 to turn it over, and it takes 2 months to get a new tenant, maybe you raised the rents, but in reality, you just lost $2,000. So there's a lot of that kind of figuring out, when do you even want to raise the rents? And, if you want to rent it a little bit less than it's worth to fill it fast and get a good tenant, I think that's more of the difficulty than actually getting people interested.
All right. So you're building up this portfolio of actual real estate. And at the same time, you're seeing, okay, I want to still play in the startup game while I have this sort of engine running for income. Where did the idea for Clever come from?
At Golden Key, they built something where you could pay an agent for an individual service. They kind of put the thought in my mind that, there's probably a market for people who don't want to pay commission. They came at it from a way you could buy an open house, you could buy a showing. After they let everyone go, I thought, you don't want to pay full price. I also know you don't want to pay individual agents for one-off services. Is there a way you can just get agents to work for less to still provide great service? And then I looked at the market, and there were other companies doing referrals where they would refer you to an agent and then refer a full price one. So it kind of all combined to kind of get the idea for Clever.
I'm sure we'll dig more into the specifics, but now that we're talking about the agents, what is the difference for a home buyer or seller between having, the best possible agent in town and having kind of a middle of the road average agent? Is there a big difference in their experience and the price they get?
So it totally depends, on if your judgment of the best agent in town is they're the agent that buys and sells the most. That just might be the face on the team, and then they actually farm you out to their team of buying and listing agents. So it can be a really kind of vague experience. You don't entirely know what you're going to get. And we definitely have found that there's kind of 3 different kinds of agents. There's the mom and pop agents, which give you the stat where the average agent makes about $30,000 and just sells a couple homes. And we found we don't try and refer, we don't want to or won't refer the buyers and sellers we come in to those kind of agents. Then you've got the agents that are in, the top 2 to 5% that are really hungry. They're awesome agents. They provide great experience and they're looking to grow their business. And then you've kind of got what's historically called the top agent in the market. And they're the ones that are doing, the lion's share of the business. They've got 10 or 20 people working for them. And they're great agents too, but at the same time, you're not always working with them. You're working with the people on their team and their, the way they have it set up. And we found no difference in terms of working with that 2 to 5% or the top agent, as long as everyone's motivated to do a great job.
Yeah, help break this down for me a little bit more, since it is so new to me. I see on your website that you guys you partner with the top local agents. So help walk me through very practically how Clever works and how you describe it to people today.
Sure. So what Clever actually does is if a seller comes onto the site, they want to list their home. On the listing side, it's a flat fee of $3,000 or 1% if the home is more than $350,000. So we save the money on the thing that our agents can control, which is their listing commission. And then obviously we still recommend you offer commission to the buyer's agent. So other agents are still incentivized to bring their clients. And then what we do when someone comes in and says they want to meet an agent, we've got about 3,000 agents now on our network who've agreed to do this that kind of meet our quality terms. And then if we don't, we'll reach out and kind of build relationships with, what our system will say are the best agents in the area. We'll call them, convince them to work with us, and then provide that great experience. Or if it's, one of the almost every other area where we have an agent, we'll see in our system who's the closest, who's got, the best ratings, who's got the most sales, and then we'll match them to someone who we think is going to do a great job for their property.
You mentioned quality of agents. Is that something that you guys have developed a metric on and you track within your company, or are there resources out there where you can say, this person is a 9 out of 10 agent for the price they get, a 10 out of 10 agent for the communication where do you get that quality measurement?
It's a little bit of both, and I think it's cool. I had some background in this. At Geekatoo, we had 7,000 tech support agents on demand, and it was the same kind of, when someone would request a service, you had to figure out, what are the metrics that actually determine success. And just like this in real estate, you've got how many transactions have the agents done? Do they live close to the buyer or the seller? What are the ratings we've gotten from, when we send them business? How long do they take to respond? And then we have something internally that takes all of that and kind of spits out, here's who we think is the best, reach out to them, let's make sure this can work. We're kind of building the tools. It's a big push internally to how do we always get the best agents to provide a great experience.
So in any transaction, sounds like we have two agents, an agent representing the seller, agent representing the buyer. And so what you're doing with Clever is helping alleviate the pain point for somebody selling a home. It sounds like it works on both sides, but talk to me about who your primary customer is and what the pain point you're solving for them is.
So it started out, we would just work with sellers and we would say, you definitely want to offer something to the buyer's agent so they're still motivated to bring their clients. But the thing we can control is it just doesn't cost as much to actually market and sell a home as it used to. You're not, MLS used to be a book. Now it's a website and then it syndicates everywhere. So if you do a great job taking photos, price it right, a lot of the marketing gets taken care of. I think it's 90% of people find their home online. So it just costs less than it used to. So we can help them by providing a great agent who are sending enough business to be willing to take a little bit of a pay cut, that they're a full-time professional agent. So we can save them there while still providing the proper incentives to bring a buyer.
I see. So this sounds a little bit like arbitrage. Like you're basically saying, we understand that it's easier to sell than it used to be. We are aggregating enough demand on our platform to work with the top agents. But at the end of the day, home seller, you're going to pay less. You're going to work with the best agent possible. Yeah. I mean, am I understanding the value prop correctly?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily use the word arbitrage, although I'd say, honestly, that could be, a fairly accurate description of it. The way we also kind of pitch it to the agents is, if you drive on the highway, you'll see Coldwell Banker, all of these agents who are paying thousands and thousands of dollars to market themselves. And every time you win a listing, you win a piece of marketing real estate and you get to put your sign in a yard. So when we partner with great agents, we definitely view it like they're our partners. We are living and dying by the agents we have, where we're sending them tons of business they're not paying for. We just charge a referral fee on the end. And we're growing their brand, growing their presence, and alleviating a lot of the cost of having to buy signs on the highway when we provide them with that marketing. So it's definitely, we kind of view it as more of a partnership, although arbitrage could be accurate as well.
Can you kind of go back to some of your earlier days? It seems like part of the reason that you're able to do this now is because you have reached this critical mass on both the agent side and on the home referral side. Can you talk a little bit about how you ramped up to that point? Did you have to favor one side of the marketplace versus the other? Or how did you build up to that critical mass where now you have some leverage?
Being honest, there's definitely a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into getting to that point when, how can you tell an agent you're going to send them a lot of business when you don't have a lot of business, even on the scale of the whole country? And then you're trying to get sellers and you have no agents. And it's definitely something we struggled with internally. And it was one of the hardest initiatives, was figuring out how do we grow the business on both sides at the same time. And I definitely think it's, a little bit of the secret sauce that we've now figured out how to drive demand generation on both sides of the platform really well.
What can you share about how you do that? Was there like automation? Were you scraping something? How did you build that demand on both sides?
So on the seller side, we've done a great job where I often will describe Clever as a digital marketing company that's masquerading as a brokerage, because we need to do that to be a compliant business. But when I talk about how I view the business, we are a marketing company and we're really, really good at that. We're a bunch of digital natives who've figured out, how to drive demand by, some traditional marketing, but a ton of performance, your PPC, Facebook, all of those things. And then we've really doubled down on content and SEO. So we're doing a great job with that. And that's really helped on both sides now that on any given day, we're getting agents and sellers just inbounding us, automatically because we've done a good job of positioning ourselves.
Did you start in some specific geographical markets, and what were those?
We started out in St. Louis because that's where we were, but very quickly we realized, we could expand this nationally as we kind of built something internally that helped us do it. A lot of it was we had no tools, and it was a lot of hard work, a lot of picking up the phone and making it happen.
Is there anything unique as you started in St. Louis and expanded to both regionally and nationally? How unique is each specific market? Are there different key indicators, or is one market good for one thing and one good for something else, or are they all kind of similar?
They're fairly similar. We definitely look at, on the map where are the other big real estate tech companies that are doing some kind of discounted commission. And sometimes we'll see it's more expensive to win listings there. Sometimes we'll see less. But on the whole, real estate is real estate. But at the same time, it's an incredibly local thing. You're not allowed to price fix commissions, but we'll hear across the country, agents will still say what a standard buyer's commission is. And there will just be different perceptions of real estate. There will be, if you take a market like Seattle that up until recently hadn't seen a price drop in 8 years, people have a different view on real estate than in a market like St. Louis where the prices haven't gone up. So, it's very different when almost everyone who's selling is selling into a profit. And then when you start working with people who sometimes might be selling into a loss, kind of their motives and incentives and how people are positioning themselves drastically change to meet kind of the needs of the people they're serving.
At this point, you said, we help people sell cheaper, $3,000 or 1% if the home sells for over $350,000. What did the world before Clever look like? How much was I paying as a home seller to have the same outcome that you guys provide now?
So traditionally, it was around 6%. It's never been exactly 6%. Some agents would go over, some agents would go less. But that was kind of, if you ask the average person, a lot of them would tell you it costs 6% to sell a home. And up until recently, a lot of brokers would actually tell their agents, the minimum at this brokerage that we charge is 5%, or the minimum is 6%. And we've seen so much competition with Keller Williams, EXP, a lot of these tech-enabled brokerages who are now coming in and they're being very agent-centric, and they're getting rid of that kind of, and other times in the industry, brokers would actually require maybe 30% of the commission an agent earned. They would take as a cut, and we're seeing a lot less of that. Like Keller Williams in most of their markets, if you hit a certain amount of commission, you pay the brokerage. They call it being capped out. You get to keep all of your commission. So it's allowed agents to be a lot more free in what they charge and really run their own business. And when suddenly there's, millions of agents, and a lot of them are now free to run their business as they see fit, a model that didn't used to be very compelling because they'd have to pay so many other fees. Now it's suddenly, we'll send you 5 to 10 listings a month. You'll keep most of that because you're capped out. And you'll use that to grow your business, and it suddenly becomes a compelling value proposition.
So usually Hornung is the math person. I'm not great at math, but if I'm calculating this correctly, a 6% commission on a $350,000 home is $21,000, and you're saying you pay $3,000 here, or even if you look at the 1% versus 6%, that's obviously a sixth of the price before. You guys are delivering enough demand to these top agents that they're willing to take a sixth of what they would normally be charging?
So the way it would break down, traditionally, you would pay some amount to the listing agent and some amount to the buyer's agent. For simplicity, let's say it's 3% to the listing agent and 3% to the buyer's agent. So if you've got a $300,000 house, that's traditionally $9,000 aside. And we come in and say, we think we can deliver the same value for $3,000 to your agent and then that 3% to the other agent. So instead of paying $9,000 to your agent, you pay $3,000 and then you're saving $6,000. So it's a really substantial amount of money. And we also feel if you think about an agent on the other, the listing agent, if they're doing 5 of those a month, they get $2,000 of the $3,000. They're walking away with $10,000 for the month, which is an awesome salary for some really meaningful work of helping all these people. So it's we feel to be a really win-win where the seller walks away happy and the agent also walks away feeling like, I've made a good amount, I'm getting business, and I'm making some serious income as well.
Do you have any touch points with the process more than just kind of connecting the dots? Do you actually make agents, are they able to sell more homes? Do you increase their capacity? Or do you have any touch points on the process that kind of reduces the friction?
Yeah, we do everything we can to make sure the process goes smoothly. An interesting insight we found is one of the biggest barriers to agents selling homes isn't really the time that it takes to sell the homes. It's actually the time that it takes to get the sellers and the buyers to agree to let you work with them. Some top listing agents will carry 40 to 80 listings at a time. And it's because listing a home, it's all about the presentation and the pricing. But, if the home is vacant, it's put on a fancy Bluetooth lockbox these days. Usually it's called Supra, where the buyer's agents can actually take their clients, unlock the home with their phone, show the home, lock it up for you, and then send the feedback. So the agents, you can carry a lot of listings, and the hardest part is actually getting the listings.
So talk to me about, anecdotally, what type of feedback are you getting from agents on both sides of the process right now? I mean, positive enough that they're using it, but what types of things are they actually saying to you about working with Clever?
So a lot of our agents absolutely love working with us, and part of it's because we're selecting for agents that love working with us. We don't want to work with an agent who will tell a seller, I'm doing this Clever thing, but I'm actually going to focus on my other business. We look for agents who kind of view it the same way I described it, as like an opportunity to grow their business and provide great service and build those meaningful relationships to get clients for life. And then on the other side, because the home is listed in the MLS, they're offering the same commission to the other agent. They have no idea that you've listed with Clever until closing day when you check out the settlement statement. And it's like, they didn't pay very much in listing commission. So there's, one of the things I really like that we avoid, if you look at companies like Trelora out in Denver, there's all this drama of agents ripping their yard signs off or saying, I don't want to show discount listings, even though they're not supposed to. There's tons of reports that it happens, and there's this industry is geared against it. With us, there's no idea that you're listing with a discount company until closing day when the money's getting wired and you pull out the settlement statement, which is definitely something that's cool to offer to our sellers.
Does this help? I mean, you say you work with top agents. Have you been able to help agents who weren't before a top agent get into that bracket by the amount that they were selling?
We have, but there's definitely some caveats there. If you came to me and said, I'm a brand new agent, can I get referrals? We would say no. We're looking for, 5 years of full-time experience, a minimum number of transactions, and we're starting to build that out more and more into our site and our messaging. So we like to think if you're a good agent that's proven you provide awesome services and your biggest barrier to entry is getting business, we're a good fit for you. But if you're a new agent with no experience, we're probably not a good fit. We're trying to provide that. We want to provide an agent who knows what they're doing and is going to provide an awesome service and trying to screen for that.
Talk to me a little bit about the real estate market across the country. How big is this market that Clever is attacking? How big could this be if everything continues to go really well?
It's truly massive. I don't know the statistic offhand, but it's billions and billions of dollars of gross commission income every year. And that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. Because if you think about the real estate transaction, it's not just agents getting commission, it's lenders getting commission, selling mortgages, there's insurance, there's title. So we kind of believe those who control the top of the funnel have the potential to, control a lot of the different steps of the process. And you're definitely seeing that consolidation in the industry. And at the same time, one thing that's cool about real estate is it's not one of those markets that's a zero sum or a winner take all. You've had Redfin been around 10 years, Keller Williams, EXP, Coldwell Banker, just tons and tons of brands that are in their own right, behemoth billion-dollar brands. And it's an industry that's so big, all of these companies can survive. You have Open Door, who's now buying up homes. They're worth over $1 billion. And it's a cool space that it is a red ocean and there's blood in the water, but it's a really big ocean. So you can kind of carve out your niche.
Speaking of kind of competition, what has your competition for people that are doing, similar things to you looked like? You've talked about other discount providers, but have you seen a lot of people entering your space doing what you guys do, or what's the competition been like?
Competition is fierce, especially the paid marketing. There's tons and tons of companies who are coming at it. Your local mom and pop agents are advertising. You've got big tech companies who are advertising their services like HomeLight just does traditional referrals, but they still compete with us because at the end of the day, there still are a finite number of people who are going to buy and sell a home in a year. So every brokerage is fighting for those customers. But we believe we've really differentiated ourselves because of our, the way we're both operating nationally and also offering something unique. We've been able to differentiate ourselves. But yeah, it's definitely a very competitive market, and why I think at its core, it's good that our team is really, really strong in digital marketing, because it's a space that's where we're entering to grow our business, when a lot of the other companies are taking more of a TV and radio approach.
Good digital marketers are some of the hardest people to find that I get asked for all the time. So Talk to me more about your team. How big is your team and what's that breakdown look like?
We're about split down the middle now between, we've got an awesome sales team, and then we have a marketing team and an engineering team. And I definitely agree, in terms of importance, it goes people, products, and profit. And there's a reason people are number one. We've gone through great lengths to figure out how to do recruiting and how to work our networks to get, the best people. I think we're blessed. My co-founder in Clever and in real estate, he went to Stanford. So when it comes time to get awesome engineers, it's, Luke, who can you call that can move? So we've pulled just an awesome head of engineering who's worked at billion-dollar companies. And if it comes down to it, has a background in machine learning to help run our engineering. And then, I went to business school, learned a lot of that. And between the two of us, we had a marketing background and had some agency experience. So we kind of had a network of who are these just awesome people who've proven they can do the various things we need, and how do we get them to join our baby? So it's been really fortunate.
So how many people do you have total?
We're at about 20 and looking to keep growing.
And how does that break down between sales, marketing, and engineering?
So 10 on sales and then about 5 and 5.
How has it been attracting talent to St. Louis?
It's definitely interesting. So we found the sales talent is awesome here. We have a kick-ass sales team that's been trained, and they're teaching us things every day. We've had huge success getting incredible marketing talent. And on the engineering front, there's a lot of engineers here, but knowing that Luke came from Stanford and he knows what the best of the best looks like, it isn't something we wanted to settle for average. We wanted to make sure that we just had incredible talent here. And one of the cool things we did was made sure we could kind of negotiate a really awesome office. We're in the Del Mar Loop, which is a really hot area in St. Louis. So we could bring in this talent from, other states and say, look where you could work. This is like St. Louis is an awesome town. The cost of living is low. And we're giving them that pitch of here's why you want to move to the Midwest. It's not what you thought it was. It's an incredible place to live and work. And we've been able to pull some incredible talent to come move here.
Talk to me a little bit about macroeconomic trends. We had a big downturn in 2008. Seems like the housing market has just gotten hotter and hotter and hotter kind of since then, since it hit bottom. What does the outlook, in your perspective, look macroeconomically, and how would or wouldn't that affect Clever?
Yeah, that is a $1 million question of where things are going. I definitely feel you were right on the money. It's been going up and up and up, and it probably isn't going to keep doing that. My gut is that it's going to level off, and then depending on what happens with the Fed and the interest rates, it might go a little bit down. But I don't think we'll see kind of a 2007 level crash. But it will be interesting because if it stays like that for a couple of years, we've been in a market where everyone who was selling into a profit. And now I think we're going to see some people who are, looking at their homes and thinking, oh man, if I pay closing costs and 6%, I'm underwater, and then I'm bringing money to close and money for a down payment. And they might be way more price conscious and looking for an agent to save, or it might go the other way and they think I need to pay more because they might feel they get the better price. We're betting that it's going to be the latter, and they think it's going to be being price conscious and saving on commissions will be, an even bigger trend. But it's definitely an interesting thing to think about.
Do you have any worry in that direction, or is there real threat do you see, or are you guys in a position where macroeconomic trends don't necessarily affect you?
So I think if there was another 2007 level crash and homes didn't sell, that would hurt. We definitely feel it if all the homes we have on the market or our partner agents have on the market, just like every other, anyone in the space would feel it. I think Open Door would feel it the most since they're the ones who own the homes. We would just think, oh, well, now we got to restart and build up our backlogs of listings, this time being priced at the new correction. But I definitely also feel strongly we've built a business that can survive in any market. And it's just being diligent to make sure we're, always making sure we still feel that way.
Obvious question I forgot to ask somehow. You told us the model for the agents. What is Clever's revenue model?
That's a great question. So we are, as a licensed brokerage, we take a referral fee. So it's $1,000 on a flat fee listing or 25% of the 1%. So our margins are pretty small, and we win by volume and being able to drive this process at scale.
And so at this level, you guys have only been around since 2017. Seems like you've made a lot of progress in a pretty short amount of time. What level have you guys broken even, and what's that number have to look like in terms of number of homes and the velocity?
I wouldn't feel comfortable going into the specific numbers of homes, but before we raised our big round of funding, we broken even and we're profitable. And then we raised the funding, and then we thought, now let's hire all the awesome talent we can. We're pacing to break even again, and then we'll kind of evaluate from there. We've definitely found a way to do this both scalably and profitably. So it's, at this point, it's how do we get the smartest people on the team or on the bus so we can go faster and grow even more.
Multiple times you brought up how important the team is to your success. What's the next big hire? What's the next big, thing that you're looking for to round out the team? Or are you really just trying to build up your ability to scale?
It's when you start a company, right, and you have a couple people, suddenly everyone's a generalist, and it's really important to have those people who you can throw at a problem. They have no experience in the problem, but that person's going to go figure it out. And then suddenly as you grow, you start getting more an engineering team, a marketing team, and it's not the same person on engineering is doing all your marketing because that's all you have. So then starting to think, who do we need to hire for the next stage of the company as we get bigger, that has big company experience, that has experience managing, what books can I read to prepare myself for that next level? And thinking, what are the key roles we need, to round out an engineering team? Like we just made, we've split up to front end and back end instead of just engineering. And it's kind of getting ready to scale the company and thinking more about who are the rock stars we want in functional roles instead of, when you first start it, who's the generalist I can hire to take over a whole area of the business, because that's all we can afford.
And how, kind of building off of that, you mentioned reading books, but how have you tried to scale up yourself as you've gone through the stage of having a few people in a garage or wherever you guys started to having 20 employees to what is next for you guys? How do you scale up?
When you start a company, I'm the one on the ground, I'm on the sales team. And I think a lot of it is, one, keeping an open mind and knowing that we don't have all the experience. We need to be actively looking to our board, our mentors, and our advisors. And then the second thing is, a lot of our core team are prolific readers. I know if I go to the gym, I'm listening to an audiobook. When it comes time to cardio on the bike, I'm reading a Kindle book, and we're trying to do 2 books at a time all the time. And it's a good way to think, what's the mix between, management, marketing, sales, and trying to learn and read all the best processes at the same time and implement them. So it's a challenge, but it's also a conscious effort of what skills do I know that I'm lacking because I've never ran a company of 20, and what books can I read, who can educate me to get ready for it.
Is your biggest cost driver headcount or marketing spend with all the digital marketing you guys have to do?
It used to be digital marketing. It's coming to be headcount, and it'll potentially swing back to marketing. It fluctuates.
How do you personally manage your time of growing this company versus having an active real estate portfolio? Do you still spend a lot of time on the actual real estate side?
I spend almost zero time on the real estate side at this point. We hired a property manager, put a lot of systems in place, and really, for better or for worse, are trusting them to take care of our portfolio. And we were fortunate that we bought right, so a lot of things can go wrong and we'll still break even there. And it was kind of a conscious decision where we entered 2018 thinking, we've proven this out, let's buy 20 more units and get even bigger. And very quickly it realized that, Clever is the bigger opportunity. We've raised real money and made real commitments to our investors. And whereas our real estate portfolio is just chugging along stably. So that's kind of it's on the back burner. And unless you brought me a deal that was so good I could buy it in under 3 hours of work, I'd sadly turn it down. As much as it pains me not to do that because I absolutely love it. It's a ton of fun, but it's firmly on the back burner.
You've talked about your investment, your recently raised round. Could you talk a little bit about how you went about fundraising and, where you found your current stable of investors?
The first ever investor, I actually cold emailed on LinkedIn, and it turns out he'd kind of been thinking about building a product just in the real estate space. We really hit it off. He gave me a really small check and then flew me out to Austin where we raised, just a bunch of micro $10,000 or $25,000, $30,000 checks. Then we got into an awesome accelerator, Capital Innovators. Through their connections in St. Louis, we got plugged into a lot of the partners in Cultivation Capital, and we raised a seed round with a personal investment from one of their partners. And then when it came time to raise a real Series A, we, got in with Cultivation Capital, Spirit of St. Louis Fund, and then a bunch of other angels who wanted to write, a lot larger checks this round. So it's been kind of a hodgepodge of VCs, accelerators, and then angels.
Talk to me about St. Louis as a place to start and run this company now. Is there anything specific to St. Louis that makes it the best place for Clever or a real estate play in general?
I'm huge on the Midwest. I can speak to St. Louis because I've lived here and I love it. But, I would assume a lot of the Midwest is like this. But I mean, our cost of living is dirt cheap. One of the reasons we were able to do this company is because I could put the cost on my credit card because I was living rent free. And then you can bring people here and pay them, a modest salary compared to what, you'd be at in San Francisco. But at the same time, they're making enough money to buy a house and do anything they want to do here. And the community is just incredible. We've got, tons of co-working spaces. We've got support from different venture capitalists. I think Cultivation Capital is the biggest VC in the Midwest, not the Midwest, in Missouri, maybe the Midwest. And it definitely felt really supportive with, Cortex, Venture Cafe, a couple other big spaces that hold events. And we felt really supported. And it's been, our office is dirt cheap for 10,000 square feet. And it's a brand new space that we renovated. And if we were in San Francisco, I don't even want to think about what we'd be paying. When here, it's like you negotiate a deal, it's under $5,000 a month, and you have this, baller office that's great for recruitment. I don't think we would have been able to do this on the money we've raised if we were anywhere but the Midwest. And here it's great because we've got all the connections. I mean, we renovated our office for a really great price because we brought out the same crew that does all of our other houses.
That covers just about all my questions. Berg, you got anything else?
You pretty much covered it. I mean, it sounds like it's an interesting space, right? Huge market. You definitely have found a way to a kind of niche where you can manage it both sides, which you said was challenging and which I wouldn't be surprised by. I guess one thing you haven't touched on, which I'm just kind of a geek about and would love to learn more, is kind of your board. And you mentioned that they were a big help for you, but would love to hear about what you think about the role of a board, how you manage your relationship with the board, and just kind of where that sits in your thought process. Because I know for something that I've seen, and I've been working professionally in venture for like 8 months now, mismanaging your board and having that relationship turn bad is one of the least fun things that you can do, both as a founder and as an investor. So would love to kind of hear what insights you've learned from that experience of working with your board.
It was something they kind of prepared us for at the accelerator, but the biggest thing for me when we pitched, he was one of the managing partners of Cultivation Capital, and he was thinking about a personal investment. We were thinking about the board. It was actually something we offered, but didn't even bring up. It was like, if you do this, we'd like for you to be on the board, because it's, we're acutely aware, we're young guys, we're growing, and we need all the experience we can get. And if you have the opportunity to get someone on your board who's sold their company for a very large exit, I don't want to say the actual number. I don't know if it's public, but they've had an incredible exit. Our board and the board observer, there's two of them that came on. They are just rock solid. They've seen it all, done it all, and give great advice. And it's, when we have a tough situation, we're shooting them a text, we're getting on a call, even if it's not a scheduled board meeting, we're bringing them in to get advice. And that's exactly what we wanted, of like, who are the most experienced people that we want to have a big interest in our business. And we actively look to pull them into the board, trying to get the people who could help us because they've seen it before. Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, I think one of the quickest ways you can shoot yourself in the foot is by not having kind of consistent and proactive communication with your board. So taking that, on yourself, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's way better to tell your board about a 10-cent problem early before it becomes a $10 problem later and you can't do anything to help out. And we did it one time, we didn't bring it up. And then after the problem got big, came to them and they immediately had the solution. It was like, man, if I had just brought this up when it started, we would have put in the same solution and we would have saved ourselves so much headache. And that was kind of the eye-opening moment. Now it's like, when in doubt, let's tell Pat and Bill and let's get some advice here. It's definitely a really awesome relationship. It's great.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Ben. After the show, if people want to learn more about you or Clever, where should they go? So if you want to learn more about Clever, we're listwithclever.com. And if you want to learn more about me personally, I write on Medium. It's medium.com, I think, /@Ben Mizes. And it's mostly, I write about real estate investing. So if you're interested in house hacking or building a portfolio, I've definitely kind of documented the journey from a house hack to a lot of apartments. And then sadly, a lot of the mistakes we've made. And, I definitely encourage you to read that and avoid a lot of the headaches and problems we've had.
Well, Jay, that was awesome. It was great listening in. But before we get to the deal memo, I think we could use a little more.
Yeah, it struck me that I have a close friend who would be an awesome addition to this episode. His name is Chris Ridenauer. He's currently the CTO at Planalytics, a company based in Cincinnati, Ohio. But previous to Planalytics, he was a co-founder of Casamatic, an artificial intelligence company for real estate agents and home buyers. The company had a lot of momentum behind them, and I know Chris learned a lot about the real estate technology space, and so I wanted to pull on his experience and wisdom here before we get into our deal memo. So please enjoy this short interview with Chris Ridenauer. Chris, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
For the listeners, can you explain what Casamatic was?
So Casamatic was two things in its history. The first was a consumer website that would ask you questions up front, like not only, what's your price range and how many bedrooms are you looking for, but also, what is your ideal commute to work? What kind of, activities and lifestyle do you want to be around? What kind of schools are you looking for? And then we would actually take everything on the market and score it. And so they weren't hard filters. So if we found the perfect house for you that actually had one less bedroom, we would show it to you because we think you can compromise. And that's honestly what a good agent would do anyways. And so we would create all these scores and show you the best homes in your area, regardless of the neighborhood they were in. So we kind of took more of a lifestyle approach to home search. Later in its life, it actually pivoted to using that lifestyle search as an agent tool. So we would sell to real estate agents the ability to use Casamatic for all of their clients, invite them and let them search together, invite both the husband and wife and see how their parameters differ, kind of take some of those early interactions about like, what are you looking for? What's important to you? And kind of move them into a digital space.
So it seems that I would assume that the first iteration of Casamatic was kind of a post-agent world you were trying to create. And then it seems like you pivoted to working with agents. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, the reality of life in real estate tech is unless you have very deep pockets, you're going to end up working with agents. And even in our original consumer version, one of the biggest things people want to do is they want to walk through a home. And you can't do that without an agent. We tried a couple different things there. We had basically like really junior agents that we would pay $25, $50 just to go walk someone through a house, and they wouldn't actually be your agent. They would just be an agent to get you through the house. But that didn't really resonate with people. What we ended up doing was working with agents, even when we're in the consumer side, and sending them basically really qualified leads, aka people who we know were pre-approved. We know they're looking at this house that we think is perfect for them. And the first time they ever meet their agent is walking through what we think is their dream home. And we were selling those leads for $100, $200 per lead. But even then, that's like the economies of scale just weren't on our side.
Okay, so in our interview with Ben from Clever, he mentioned that real estate tech is a red ocean, as he called it. It's something with a lot of competition, and they're competing on keywords and things. So what was your perspective? You mentioned having deep pockets. What was your perspective of the role that technology could and should play in the real estate market, given that it's such a competitive sort of landscape?
I think my pessimistic sort of view right now is unless you're going to provide, like all startups, you need a 10x better experience than what's out there for you to really start to gain traction. And so unless you're creating an immense value, which I think at this point is an agentless transaction, you're probably just going to get eaten up by the big guys who just currently work with the agents. Like the realtors have laws on their side. They have amazing entrenchment, even to the point now where like you still see 6% commission on selling. That 6% started to show up when agents had to do literally everything for you on both the buying and selling side. But now think about it. You reach out to an agent like, hey, I'm thinking about buying a home. Most of them are like, great, send me some links from Zillow that you want to go look through. It's like, wait, what's your role here? Like, you're supposed to help me find the house. And that's actually why we even started Casamatic, was there's like less and less that was being done by the agent, but the commissions were still saying so high. And it just doesn't seem like that's changing, even with, Zillow out there and all these other bigger, sites. They're not really driving down the prices. And I think we're just going to need someone to come and just like wipe it out. I think it's going to need to be someone with deep pockets, someone who can just buck the trends, find a way through, the Uber to cabs, like really just wreck that world. Otherwise, we're just going to see very incremental improvements and consumers don't flock to those.
You talked about at one point working with some lower level agents to show the homes, I hadn't thought about the different tiers of agents that exist in these markets. Another thing Ben shared with us in the interview was they work exclusively with what are identified as the top agents in markets. So how competitive is it to work with a top agent, and how good do you think that makes the experience for the home buyer or the home seller relative to a mid-tier or low tier?
Oh, it's night and day. I would say like somewhere between 5 and 10% of the agents do 90% of the sales in a city. It's really a difference between your full-time agent and your part-time agent a lot of times, but even some of those full-time agents aren't necessarily top tier. But like they have the connections. If you're a buyer, they know of properties going on the market before they ever hit the market. So if you're in a really competitive market, most houses are sold before they hit the MLS. They just need to put them on the MLS so they can get all the approvals and get all the legal stuff out of the way. And if you're selling, you want that person who knows of buyers or has a Rolodex of buyers, or even potential buyers, like people who aren't actively searching, but you put your house up with them. They know someone who's looking for something like your house in your neighborhood, and they get this person to even like think about purchasing at that time. It really is just like it's a networking thing, and that's going to be really hard to replicate, I think, in a digital space when it is so people driven in the current world. But it does make a huge difference right now.
So I'm going to ask this question just kind of straight out. Clever's model is sort of a digital lead generation play, and it's making the process, they're taking that 6%, and instead of saying 6% of listing, we'll do it for $3,000, kind of a flat fee on the selling side. What's your immediate reaction to that? And do you have any red flags?
Immediate reactions are the one positive they have going from is agents are only willing to pay, and pay can come in a lot of different ways, including discount, for lead generation. That's all they care about. They won't pay for tools. They only pay for things that they believe can drive them more leads, not necessarily convert leads better. We found that out pretty quickly. But I like that it is lead generation that is positive. At the end of the day, it's like they have to... The quantity thing, good agents, top agents already have a massive amount of quantity. They have to believe that for whatever reason, the leads you're bringing them are going to convert faster. Like they would only give a discount if they believe on a buyer, if they're like very well qualified and know exactly what they want. And they're only going to give a discount on selling if the house is in a really hot market, or it's in really great condition, or they're willing to underprice. And so I worry that they could just ignore. They are used to being, as a collective, willing to ignore things they don't like and let them go away. And at the end of the day, people still need to sell their houses. So I could definitely see their actual top agents be like, I'm not willing to drop my price. I have more than enough bandwidth. And then I'm drowning in leads right now. I just need more team members. That'd be my only concern, is the top agents don't necessarily need the help. It's the mid-tier ones.
Is there anything else related to real estate technology that I'm not asking that I should be asking?
It really comes down to, there are two types of innovations at play, those that play in the space with agents. And really the latest ones have been like Zillow allowed you to draw on a map 10 years ago, and then they haven't really innovated since, but they just drive so many ad clicks, it doesn't matter. And Redfin gives you a discount, but they just are at this point essentially just another real estate player. They're just a discount brokerage and less of a tech play. And then there's the ones who are going completely outside it. So you have like Open Door, I believe they're in Phoenix, who they're just buying and selling properties, that they buy it themselves, cash offer, renovate it, allow you to walk through it by yourself because it's all digital. And unlock it with your phone, walk through the house, make an offer on your phone, and buy it. And you get sent the paperwork over legal or over email. It's fantastic. That's going to be the type of play that's really going to disrupt if they can make it scale. I have no idea if they will. But really, it's like either you're in the real estate space and you can create a decent business, but you're really not going to actually be able to innovate. They basically made sure of that. Or you're going to have to go completely around it, and you're just going to get done on all sides by all parties. But I think there's a huge upside.
All right, Erik with a K. We just spoke with Ben Mizes of Clever Real Estate. I'd love to hear from your perspective as an analyst, not even really pretending, that you just had a conversation with a founder. Walk us through your framework for how you continue to analyze this opportunity.
Yeah. So, I mean, initial, just first blush reaction, it seems interesting, right? It's a huge market. Anything in the real estate is almost interesting just for the fact that it's in real estate, just because of how big it is. They found an interesting niche where they are kind of able to take some margin away in the middle of this process and kind of act as like a cog in the middle, which is interesting and pretty impressive that it sounds like they've been pretty successful so far, because I alluded to it when I asked him about kind of building up both sides of the marketplace, but that is one of the most underrated parts of the startup tech world, is building up two sides of a marketplace. And it's really hard to do. And the fact that they've been able to do it with some pretty good success, it seems like, is, I think, very positive. My probably biggest worry is their margin and just how it seems like it's already razor thin. Well, I'll say it's already thin. And the danger with inserting yourself as a cog into the process is just what margin you have just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so the challenge for them will be to keep creating that value where they can protect that margin, because I don't think they'll be able to really expand it. And so they really have to protect it, and that'll be hard to do. So that's kind of my initial kind of jumble of thoughts. The way I like to think about things is, I don't know, other people have come up with this, but thinking about kind of there are four things I really think about. So the first is, how big is the problem that they're solving, which is huge. So check that box. How painful is the problem for the people experiencing it? Is this a hair on fire problem for them? And I think that's a solid check. I think the home buying and selling process is generally pretty painful. I've never done it, but just talking with other people who have, I think it's pretty painful. I don't know if I think the cost of it is painful, but I think just the overall process is probably what's most arduous. So I think, saving, what did he say? He did the math for us, but he ended up saving like $3,000, 25% off listing prices, something like that.
Yeah. It definitely seemed to be like he's really helping get a good experience for the seller and move things along. But, it strikes me that we're in a time when selling probably isn't as difficult right now as it has been historically with how hot the market is.
Yeah. And I mean, and he mentioned it's cheaper than it's ever been before. It's probably a little easier, but I still think from the seller perspective, and maybe I'm just putting myself too much on this, but if someone could say, okay, I'm going to save you $3,000 and I'm going to make the process super seamless and easy, I think the process being super seamless and easy is actually more of a draw for me than the $3,000, because in the grand scheme of things of a home sale, that $3,000 is not a huge amount. But if you can alleviate the pain of the process, that's a big difference to me. So I think it's interesting from that perspective. And the last two things I always want to look at are the team. I mean, I haven't met the team, but it sounds like they've been able to attract some high quality talent to St. Louis. And I like how they're thinking about talent attraction, and some of the network they've built sounds impressive. I really err on the side of, I want to see a founder that has some personal kind of skin in the game, or has some, has personally experienced the problem. And it sounds, while Ben did have a lot of experience in real estate, it sounds like he was much more of a entrepreneur that saw an opportunity in real estate, as opposed to someone that grew up living, sleeping, and eating real estate. And so while it's not a problem, I definitely would kind of err on the side of preferring that a founder that I be working with really has that deep personal connection to the problem they're solving. But so he didn't grow up, his dad was more of an entrepreneur than he was a real estate agent. So he didn't grow up around it. But I think whatever, slight misgiving that might be for me, Ben, super sharp guy, really knew his stuff. And some of the questions I asked him about his investment process, and specifically my final question about how he manages his board, was probably one of the best answers I've ever received in discussing how someone thinks about their board. Like I mentioned, board mismanagement is something that a year ago, just being from the outside looking into the space, wouldn't have realized how big of a problem it is. But being able to consistently and proactively communicate with your board, I think really is one of the highest leverage things you can do. It's not super intensive for your time as a founder, but if you can be disciplined about updating your investors and your board and asking for help when you need it, the amount of benefit you can get from that is pretty huge. So to hear him think about his answers around board and how much of an asset he views them, he doesn't view them as these like cranky old bosses that he has to, send updates to. He really thinks of them as an asset, and he's trying to figure out the best way to leverage them as a founder. That I loved, and that was one of the best answers I've heard to that question. So it got me, in terms of the founder, I was very impressed by Ben, especially given some of his thoughtfulness around his fundraising and his board management.
You talked about being a cog in the process and how that could squeeze margins over time. Were there any other red flags or hints at something that might be a red flag in the future that you heard through the interview?
I don't think so. I don't think there was anything that jumped out at me that I was worried about. I thought it was kind of surprising that the founder said we almost think of ourselves as a digital marketing agency. It was surprising, from the, I hadn't really expected that to kind of be their role, but I guess that could be some sort of worry in the terms of their competitive differentiation. Definitely don't want to downplay how hard it is to be a good digital marketing agency, but is that a sustainable competitive advantage? I don't know. And so I think it'd just be, if I were to talk to Ben again, I'd really want to dig in more with their model and, not only their unit economics, but what their competitive advantage is. It sounds like their kind of unfair advantage is their marketing acumen, their content creation, and their SEO. And while that's all definitely important, is that strong enough to build a massive business off of that being your kind of sole point of differentiation? I don't know. So that's what I'd want to learn more about and ask more questions about if I talk to him again.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Erik, so much for being on the show. If people want to learn more about you or follow your writing or anything else, where would you send them?
I'm pretty active on Twitter at a Berg's Eye View. I'm always talking about tech and VC and sharing cool articles. And then I also have a blog, abergseyeview.com, where I try to post pretty much weekly about interesting things I'm thinking about, topics or stories, personal experiences from venture. And I actually started that blog as kind of a way to get into venture. So it's kind of cataloged my story of being from the outside looking in. And now that I'm an analyst at a venture firm, some of my key learnings. So would definitely encourage anyone to check that out. But yeah, always happy to interact on Twitter. Always happy to talk with entrepreneurs or other people trying to get into the venture space and kind of bounce ideas around.
All right, Erik, we have a lot of context here between Berg's breakdown and my interview with Ben and Chris Ridenauer. So where do you want to start here?
I'm going to start with a shadow.
Wah.
Is that the shadow music?
Yeah.
When I was growing up, my mom used to always tell me, I don't know if she always told me this, but she told me this pretty frequently, so enough that I remember it. Never compete on price. And throughout this interview, it felt to me that Clever was competing on price as their primary pillar. I think that Berg had a really nice point that's tangential to this, where he said, eventually that price competition is going to go away, so are you making the process better? Or he said something along those lines. And that is my biggest shadow. So I'm just going to start out with that. It's what I have the hardest time getting my head around is price as a competitive advantage.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for any business. It's tough for the freelancers I work with. If you price yourself low and you're in a pricing competition, it's kind of a race to the bottom. So to price yourself low, for Ben and Clever to price themselves low and maintain that position, they're going to have to do something unique And his standpoint is that their uniqueness comes from their ability to essentially digitally market and pull in more leads for this top agent than they can do on their own or any other competitor can do.
Right. Price is inversely correlated with quantity if you want to be successful. You have to have quantity if you have a low price.
There's this interesting dichotomy to me, and we're clearly kind of starting on the opportunity side of things here. There's this interesting, maybe duality is the better word to put it, where right now you see Zillow pulling in a new CEO. Zillow is trying to go the route of eliminating agents. They want to say, we want to make the process agentless and be 10x better by getting rid of that position entirely. And in talking with Chris, his standpoint was when he was doing Cosmatic, you either had to be bold and do that agentless vision of the real estate world and go after that, which they kind of started going down, but got kind of beat up doing, or you have to work with the agents. Ben is clearly working with the agents here. So as an investor, you have to think about what version of the world do you see playing out? And if you see it moving towards an agentless world, where does Clever play in? Or how big is that window opportunity, and can Clever hit it and make a meaningful outcome in that window?
How long ago could we have gotten rid of the physical humans that work in a toll booth?
Probably a long time ago. Long in tech terms, like years ago.
I think it's human nature to not change things drastically, especially when they are jobs. I think that the longer something has been around, the longer it will be around. And I think it's Nassim Nicholas Taleb who calls that the Lindy effect. Or maybe it's someone else. I probably just attribute everything to Nassim Nicholas Taleb because he writes so many books on business. But I think that a agentless world is probably further off than people think. If it would have been disrupted by technology, by just being a marketplace, it would have been disrupted by now.
You could make the same argument that you're making with toll roads for servers at a restaurant too. But the interesting difference, I think, in the agent world versus toll booths or restaurants is that a lot of the agents are, especially the top 1%, are entrepreneurs, which means something. I haven't thought through exactly what that means, but I think that means that they probably are going to have stronger resilience because it's not an aspect of a business, it is their business.
They also have the benefit of being mandated by regulation. So you have to have an agent walk through a house, or a registered agent. I guess that could be, in some states, maybe it can be a digital entity now, but you still have to have that license to sell on a state-by-state basis.
It seems to me that this is, at worst, a window opportunity, the way that Ben's attacking it. Because he's working with the agents, as Chris kind of alluded to, as a must-do at this point without being super capitalized and trying to create an entirely new process. And so there is some level of opportunity here if those agents are saying, yes, we like working with Clever. Clever is bringing us more leads than we could do on our own. We're willing to take the discount. Like, they are putting their money where their mouth is, saying they're going to take a significant discount here to do the work with these home buyers because they're getting that many leads. So there is some secret sauce there, but I don't know how defensible it is. It could be at the whim of Google's algorithm for search, for example. It's less about tech that is built proprietarily and owned and able to be built on top of into perpetuity, and more about understanding digital marketing, to my estimation.
I get a lot of hints of periodic edibles in this kind of this deal memo that we're going through right now. Regulated space, carved out a niche by doing something amazing and better than all of their competitors, subject to the whims of future regulation and large money / big players. All of that kind of feels the same. And I'm left with the question of what's next. I wasn't in the interview, so I didn't get to ask that question specifically, but what's the next product or avenue, or what's tangential? What's the add-on here? What are we going to do once we have all of the market share?
Good news is it's a big market. In fact, I think we would put it into your huge market bucket.
I'd put it in the bigger than huge market bucket. I'd put it in the, when this market crashes, the entire financial system of the United States and the world is put in jeopardy. That's a really big market. Like, There are very few markets larger than real estate. Maybe public equities right now because we're at a 10-year bull run. I don't even know, but it is massive.
Massive market, and probably the narrowest of margins of any company we've had on the podcast so far. 1%, sorry, 25% of a 1%, 25 basis points per
Did you say
transaction.
25% of a 1%?
Eric, what have we learned about me and numbers?
You're fantastic at them, Jay. You when I think about you, I just think J. Klaus, Pascal, Einstein, all in the same breath.
I'm just glad to hear you're thinking about me. So to move on to Ben as a founder, the question of will this founder be successful in this business and in life? Ben's experience to this point as a young guy is awesome. The things that he's learned and tried himself. When he was talking to me about 4-family homes, I am now more interested in buying a home than I have ever been because he made it so accessible to me of what I could do. And it sounds like a fun project to work on with my dad.
So when I was listening to this interview, I immediately thought about the Bigger Pockets podcast and house hacking. I don't think the term originated on there, but they talk a lot about duplexes and 4-family homes and kind of just everything that Ben went through. It was almost like I was back in my cube in Chicago listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast, which I listened to like all 300 episodes to date or something. Little fun fact about me there, Jay.
Ben, to me, strikes me as the consummate entrepreneur, an entrepreneur that I strive to be. And so I have no doubt that Ben is going to be successful in life with his entrepreneurial ventures, with Clever or without Clever. I did not get the sense that Clever is going to be his life's work, where he's saying, like, I, by damned, am going to make real estate agents more money and make the home buying process and selling process simpler. He cares about that now, and he probably cares about it a lot now. Did I see it as like a, this is my one true calling type drive? Not necessarily. Not ruling it out, but I didn't get that vibe.
That gets to a point that I kind of want to talk about in VC, which is this idea that you have to invest in someone who has their like one life's calling for it to be a great investment. There are a lot of entrepreneurs who exit multiple companies, who do an incredible job and then find another incredible opportunity and take it on. I think that this opportunity has all the hallmarks that you're looking for, except for high margins. It has a huge market, an incredible founder who thinks very thoughtfully about his team and recruiting talent. He said that everyone is consummate readers, which I love. That's probably a personal bias. And they have just so much momentum going for them right now that we can't really sit here and say, hey, this might not pivot into something else or something better. And sometimes it's better just to get on the wave. So I think that that point is playing into a narrative of VCs believing that you have to be all in, whole hog, this is your thing. I like how we use the phrase whole hog on this podcast, by the way.
It's a staple now.
Yeah. And I don't think that is true. I think that you can build great businesses with something you are passionate about. It doesn't have to be your Mona Lisa.
You're right. You know, I didn't get any type of shiny object syndrome by any means. He even went so far as to say, I have put aside my own real estate investing portfolio for now to focus on this. So I think that's a very fair and more valid point there. He seems totally bought into this business right now.
So what do you want to see in 6 to 18 months from now with Clever?
This business is predicated on volume. They're in market. They are generating listings and sales for these agents. I'm looking totally at traction in terms of number of transactions that they're facilitating. And also, this is probably what you were going to say, Eric, how that breaks down by geography. Are they breaking down into different areas of the country and expanding in those areas effectively?
How did you know I was going to say that?
Because it's the better answer.
Oh, that was a compliment in disguise. He talked about this breakdown of the top real estate agents and how it breaks down per market and how, you know, the top 5% do 90% of the deals or whatever it is and what they're shooting for. That means there is a set amount of agents in each market in the United States. And if they expand, Canada, Mexico, wherever. So geographic expansion to me is the most interesting. How are they expanding? What cities are they in? Because once you get into one city, If you have one agent in every city in the United States, it's going to be easier to get that second agent, I think. And once you have a few agents in each city, you have kind of hit your huge transaction numbers that you're talking about.
I'm also keeping an eye on that margin and saying, has this maintained or gotten smaller? It'd be great if it got larger, but if it's getting smaller, why? Is it pressure from the agents to say, this is too much of a cut that I'm taking? Is it competition? I'm just staying vigilant on that because as narrow as those margins are, you've just got to keep an eye on it.
Or is it growing because there's a finite supply of houses being sold? And if every agent wants to bid essentially on the clever deal flow, then that margin could increase.
That'd be killer. That'd be a great sign. All right, guys, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Thanks to Erik Berg and Chris Ridenour for taking part. This is a big, thick, meaty one, lots of components. So if you have any thoughts, tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm, and we will talk to you next week. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter @UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Erik and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Erik Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind, bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire, used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on rhyming, find a way.